Hello. Well, that set the tone, I think, for this discussion. We don't have much time, but I want to say thank you both for, for your work, and I'm honored to actually speak to you. So, Dr. Olupifola, Ms. McCannon, good to meet you. And so, 1966. Doctor, you got to New York around 1966, I believe?
Actually, I grew up in New York.
You grew up in New York?
I was 4 years old.
Oh, 4 years old, okay. All right, that's
Landed in
long.
Brooklyn, most.
Landed in Harlem.
Well, no, I landed in Brooklyn.
You landed in
Most
Brooklyn.
people, when they came to the United States.
St. Thomas, yes.
Yes, I was born in St. Thomas.
Yes.
And we landed in Brooklyn. The Bronx.
And your generation's home.
Yeah.
Your generation's home.
Third generation Harlem?
Third generation, yeah. So what was Harlem like in the 60s?
Well, we were in the middle of a national movement,
Yeah.
the Civil Rights Movement.
Mm-hmm.
So Harlem was very much a part of that whole energy.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the same issues that were happening in the South was happening, what do we call, up north,
Up north, or up south.
up south.
Yeah.
So Harlem was alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
Music, there was a tremendous amount of artistic activity
Yeah.
connected to, I guess we would call it revolution at that time. We were revolutionaries. Since that, we were looking past to get out of the box that very often we were kind of thrown into.
Yeah. Could you describe that box?
I remember it as, I was very young at that time, I was probably like 17, and I, due to the inspirations of watching the Civil Rights Movement, the music of people like Nina Simone, I felt this Afrocentric type of energy coming towards me. And normally I would have been shuttled, if at all shuttled, because as a woman that's a whole other issue, into a Eurocentric path. I didn't want to go in a Eurocentric path. And so the revolution came along at the perfect time for me because I was feeling all of this energy. I happened to meet Wayusi just by luck, and because I had volunteered at like an after-school program here. And the director had seen Wayusi on the fence, and he told me, you need to go over there. So that was probably Wednesday. That Saturday, when Wayusi set up on the fence, I was right there. And in many ways, I never left.
So when Nina talks about the fence, she's talking about the actual fence.
It wasn't part of the box.
The fence ran from 127th Street to 131st Street on what is now known as Adam Clay Boulevard. Then 7th Avenue, really. And the way you see, originally beginning as the 20th century creators, that was the origin.
Yeah.
Where artists from the tri-state area kind of converged on Harlem to begin to talk to one another, to begin to find ways to exhibit, open doors. So, and getting back to the question about Harlem, Harlem was alive with nightclubs.
You were a musician too.
Well, I was a musician.
Yeah.
Well, you never stopped being a musician. I don't play anymore. But, you had many clubs featuring jazz. You had a real theater movement then. It was a black theater movement then. And it was just alive. You had all kind of programs for young people. For instance, How You Act, which was a real major program coming out of the War on Poverty policy. And you had, out of that, grew what we call How You. And it was, somebody talked in the last panel about Leroy Jones, Mary Baraka. We were on the streets of Harlem, the way you see, 3rd Outdoor Art Festival.
Yeah.
When, through How You Act, Mary Baraka and a whole crew of people came into Harlem and settled into a brownstone on 131st Street. And thus, people regard that as the beginning of the Black Lives Movement.
Yeah. It's interesting that, at this particular time, you're talking about autonomy, right? You're talking about building a relationship to art and to the community at the same time, or maybe building a relationship to the community through art. Now, this idea of exhibiting in majority white institutions, what was your relationship to that, just in terms of what artists consider success, or do you consider your relationship to community more of a form of success than that kind of other validation?
Well, it's funny because one of the reasons that the 20th century creators dissipated and went into where you see was a breakaway organization. A group of us did not want to integrate at that juncture with the Metropolitan Museum and others. And the leader of the 20th century creators, named James Sneed, wanted to begin to negotiate with the Met and other mainstream institutions. We didn't want to do it, so we broke away and formed the Waves of the Arts. That's how Waves was born.
This seems like more like politics. Just in terms of, not just making the art, but how, in fact, you have to negotiate, black presence. And if you want to get inside of these major institutions, there's a lot of translation, right? But, your work, you're going way back just in terms of the kind of work you do with the sewing and the idea of quilt making, right? How did you see your practice and how did you see your practice fitting into the program?
When I initially joined WAC, I joined as a painter printmaker. It was much later on that I merged all those forms into what I'm currently doing, which is what I call art quilts. People may not realize this, but with all these different prejudices, I'm black, I'm a woman, I'm Afrocentric in mind, then came the other prejudice about textiles. I couldn't get into a whole bunch of galleries. I couldn't get grants because what I was doing was considered women's work, and it just didn't have the same value in their mind as the so-called fine art. Because when you see, the wonderful thing about what you see, not only did they give me an education in the fine arts, they allowed me to express myself however I figured I wanted to express myself.
Right.
It really wasn't a separation of women's work versus the fine art. Then, also as a young black woman artist, my focus and my thoughts were the outer community, the white world, they're really not interested in me, and but my people are. And so where you see myself, where we at, our main focus was to begin building our own audiences, getting our own customers, because there's enough money out there within our own communities to support us as artists. We chose to go that realm rather than beat down doors that simply did not want us.
Right. And you had 2 galleries, am I wrong? 2 galleries.
No, we had actually one gallery. One of the reasons we were on the fence, and we put our work on the fence, is because we realized at that point that our people, African American people from the Caribbean, were really not exposed to the quote-unquote fine arts. Dance, music, spoken word even, were more prevalent within our community.
And that's the African sense, right? You have all of the dynamic arts, right? Not visual art primarily, but you have the music, right? You have the dance, all integrated into this Africanity that's...
Well, I think it was one of the reasons, as Linda expressed, talking about prejudice, I think the bias there was the fact that the fine arts were considered high art, and the others were considered, for lack of a better word, lesser form. So thus our people were not exposed to that when we grew up with that. I remember fondly in my house, as I was a kid, my mother went to Flying Diamond and bought a big picture of a waterfall. And that was my exposure to art.
Sure.
So that was the issue. We needed to bring the art to the people because we felt that the visual silences,
Right.
have the kind of equations that could lift out people's consciousness up.
Well, it's a dynamic sensibility, right? Since, well, if institutions are prioritizing painting, traditional painting and sculpture, and I believe, which made you actually brought up the point that academia is not necessarily the place you learn to be an artist, right? At what point did you actually begin to recognize that affirming each other was actually the way forward, rather than depending on affirmation from the outside? At the core of what you see is sort of like an intergroup affirmation, right? And from there, I guess that reaches the community, but in what ways did you affirm one another?
I think, with Lucy in particular, we never really wanted to approach the outer world. We were more interested in, like Adamola said, building our own cultural institutions. And these were the people who loved and appreciated us, and who also understood the art that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, no, institution building was one of our main focuses. We understood at that point that if you have to depend on other people to affirm your quality for who you are, that you will continue to be subservient. So one of the things we set out to do, the way you see, was to open our own gallery. And that created Naiba Yasanaa, which was founded in 1967, by 5 of our members who took the initiative to actually lease this space, build the walls, put up the lights, sand on the floor, and we created Naiba Yasanaa, which went on for well over a decade and a half, and was a center where many of the people you mentioned, Mary Baraka, Tunji,
It was
Carol Saunders, great musicians.
cultural space. It was a cultural space, not just for fine art, but a launching pad for your ideas.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And what was, so there's an uptown dialogue and there's also a downtown dialogue, right? Can you explain the downtown dialogue amongst Black artists?
well, I wasn't downtown.
In this newfound, and I say newfound because.
I mean, King Caliber,
certainly some of our pioneers like Richard and Romeo and others had already began to spiral to kind of begin to set parameters of what expression by African members were.
So was the uptown world and the downtown?
Yes, it was.
I mean, separated. That's my main point.
Well, yes and no,
Okay.
because the mentality may have been slightly different. However, our goal was the same. The Syndicate Gallery was founded to assist young Black artists like myself in having a space to exhibit. So there was a lot of collaborations. There was also arguments because we had different sensitivities. However, there was a lot of collaboration.
Yeah.
You know, I think there was a division there. Uptown, because we felt that our art had to be relevant to the struggle, quote unquote. More, our work was more representational. So those artists who were doing abstract work kind of were like, oh, you know, and that was the schism there.
Yeah.
But as Digger said, the objective was the same. We just didn't quite fully comprehend it at that point.
Right.
And that created somewhat of a division in terms of philosophy and even communicating with one another.
Sure. So what do you think your legacy is, just in terms of where you see your legacy today? Do you see the things that you were trying to do just in terms of cultural affirmation? Do you see that extending into this particular moment in any particular form? Or?
Absolutely. I think the reason I brought these few magazines here is because one of them is Black Theater. The way you see in its uniqueness connected with the New Lafayette Theater, which was in the vanguard of the Black Theater movement. And the way we connected was that we began to integrate the visual arts into the old theater movement. For instance, when the New Lafayette opened on 137th Street, which was formerly Renaissance Movie Theater, we were asked to paint the lobby.
Sure.
So when you walked into Lafayette, you saw these magnificent images and masks. And then several of us learned or perfected our skills in terms of scenic design.
Mhm.
So there was a real merger there between the way you see artists and the New Lafayette Theater.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's one of the legacies.
Yeah.
The other legacies is, of course, Naimba Yasana,
Uh-huh.
which was one of the earliest black-owned galleries,
Mhm.
artist-owned galleries. And I think the general legacy is that we were in the vanguard.
Mhm.
I have fond memories of meeting Professor Dr. Jeff Donaldson.
Uh-huh.
We had attended what was called at that point the Onyx Conference. It was a big conference every year called together all the black movements. After one of the sessions, Jeff and I walked over to Naimba Yasana. So that was a revelation to him that he had these artists who created their own gallery.
Right.
And the piece that's over at the gallery, and I hope everybody had a chance, Shango,
Uh-huh.
I had just completed that maybe a few months before it was hanging there. Well, artists can sense when you've connected with another artist and you kind of open a portal
Right.
for some new equations, let's put it that way. Well, when Jeff looked at Shango, I knew immediately that he was affected.
Mhm.
And I think the Wall of Respect came after, what year was that, 1970?
Yeah. Africa. Yes. Yeah.
Well, the Waste was already in existence.
Right.
Jeff had seen this piece.
Mhm.
And subsequently, I think, went on to, after seeing the Lazy Gallery,
Right.
I think he was inspired
Mhm.
to go back to Chicago and in some ways help to inspire the Wall of Respect. These are things that most historians don't know about because we don't really, I don't find the historians really getting a chance to talk to the artists who are really looking at that particular period of history. So
Yeah.
this is valuable. Thank you, Howard and
Yeah.
Sarah.
Now, why do you think, like, why do you see a schism between the kinds of scholars that can write these histories and your particular interest? I mean, do you find that scholars are really interested in engaging the kinds of ideas that you both were engaged in terms of the pro-black stance, the kind of Pan-Africanism? Do you find it an easy sell among scholars who can sort of continue your legacy or write about it? Or do scholars, or not?
Well, Lisa is a perfect example of a scholar who
Mhm.
not only has the interest
Mhm.
and inquisitiveness to want to really look at that, but has also done some magnificent work on that. In general, though, I think scholars need to kind of step up and look at this period. That's why this venture here
Mhm.
is so valuable, and I keep saying that to the curators. And hopefully, this will open up eyes to that vital period,
Mhm.
such as Rebuttal and the whole late 60s, 1970s, above and beyond spiral,
Right.
to look at what was happening within the Harlem communities outside of the quote-unquote mainstream art world. Our work, we looked at our work in some ways as a weapon or a
Mhm.
kind of a teaching tool for our people because we felt that it was needed to pick up their consciousness and their pride in their culture. So that was really our mission.
It's interesting because it's a cross stream, right? So you have the sort of the Black Arts movement in music, right? You have the Black Arts movement in poetry, and then in the visual arts, the one way to keep that legacy going, especially if you make objects, is to have institutions that actually keep those objects safe, right?
And present them.
And present them.
Yes.
So in terms of your work continuing to live or be present, I mean, if you make a mural inside of a building, right, that building gets sold, the mural may get covered, and so there are ways in which the wonderful work that you both have made and what you say has made may disappear just because of real estate, right? But in terms of the objects you made that can be collected, right, how do you see your work entering collections? Are there collections that are interested in collecting your work so that it may be presented in the future and the ideas within that work extend to the future?
I would say definitely so. We have a lot of people within our own community who collect our work. There are a few museums who are actually collecting the work, showing the work, exhibiting the work, presenting papers on the work. There are a lot more books now about Black art. The only issue I have is that I'm older than myself, we're all getting older, and the history that we made and did can really only be truthfully told by those who were there. We're disappearing. So the outer world needs to seize the moment, talk to us, look at our papers. We have flyers, booklets. We used to have like Black Creation magazines that nobody knows about because all of this predated computers. So,
Well, you know, just piggybacking on what David said, Soul of the Nation is a magnificent attempt at capturing some of that fury. There's some curious omissions.
I heard attempt.
Okay. But I think that effort has opened up a lot of people's eyes to the fact that there is, number one, there has been movements, that our work covers a broad spectrum. For instance, one of the things I learned as I got older, talking about aging or maturing, better word, is the whole idea of abstract art is not unique to Europe. In the belly, in South Africa, you look at many of the textiles, all those are very, very quote-unquote abstract. But at the point that we were developing where there was this little schism, we didn't fully understand because we were so focused on creating art that had something to do with uplifting our people's image, and that called for figurative work.
Right, right. And so, you know, to actually treat African-based art as cultural artifacts and not necessarily aesthetic artifacts, right? So to pull the meaning from African art just in terms of objects representing a cosmology, representing religion, representing community, is what is usually missing, right? If you say someone like Picasso in that Western canon. And so when you address...
I don't think Picasso's a good example.
Well, I'm just saying that he's a bad example of someone, he's a good example of someone using African art for not the cultural meaning of the art form, but someone using artwork to actually produce the aesthetic of modernism, which connects to colonialism and so forth, right? And so when you guys use African art forms as a way to speak to a community, that's a whole different trajectory than the canon as expressed through the Western tradition. And so do you see yourselves as the beginning of, well, I mean, one could say the whole Renaissance, right? But that's like motifs, just in terms of a lot of the ways in which they dress African objects, right? So you guys are actually getting to the cultural aspects of it and reinvigorating the cultural aspects of it, right? The festivals and all that, right? And, you know, so do you see that, you know, the legacy of that work's connection to community? Do you see yourselves as an extension of the way African art is a representation of community, but here?
One of the main reasons that we got involved with theater was because of that extension and because of that affinity with traditional African cultural values, which is the festival, the grand display. So theater provided that for us, and plus it was right in the middle of the civil rights, the whole idea of black expression.
Right.
And you could do that in theater.
Right.
So that bond that we created with the New Lafayette Theater and other theaters, we also bonded with the National Black Theater, which was one of the first theaters to go national on television. Remember that program, Soul?
Soul.
It had a favorite. Well, the National Black Theater, after they experienced one of our first productions, which was The Ritual to Bind Together and Strengthen, to the long struggle ahead. That was one of our first cooperative productions with the New Lafayette Theater. They went on and created The Ritual. And as a result of them creating it, they were asked to come on to Ellis Hazelwood, and the rest is kind of history.
Now, that's an interesting trajectory to me, right? This idea that the legacy is not in the acceptance of Western cultural norms in terms of modernism in the canon, but the trajectory of you guys are sort of the seed of a cultural revolution using artwork that prioritizes interrelated connections in the community. I mean, that's a whole other canon.
You just brought, if I may.
Yeah.
This is Black Theater Magazine, which was one of the only publications that really documented what was going on in the Black theater nationally. But in it is a symbol of the way you see it, and let me just read this short book. It says, imagination is the seed of progress. We plant and cultivate the seed in the garden of truth.
Right, in truth, right?
This magazine was published, I think, in 1971.
1971, right? Around all the other problematic stuff happening in the art world, you're producing this, and I'm thinking about the whole Renaissance of fire, and like fire being a self-produced,
Yes.
avant-garde journal.
It was a seminal work.
That's right, and a similar work with art. And the way that spoke, the young voices, right? Most of the Legend Hughes and the more radical voices were in there. So, I mean, that's actually in the tradition, right? In terms of what you're doing, that's actually in the tradition. And I wish that, I mean, does that have a home, like the Schomburg or these kinds of periodicals? Or
Yeah.
okay.
I think the Schomburg is one of the shining examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
The way you see have an archive.
Mm-hmm.
We have an extensive archive going back to our founding.
Wow.
Doesn't compare to Schomburg, I'm not comparing to Schomburg, but we do have.
Yeah.
And various organizations
Mm-hmm.
have maintained archives. For instance, the National Black Theater, for one, the New Heritage Theater,
Mhm.
all of them have archival
Right.
collections.
Because I'm worried, as a scholar, I'm worried about the consolidation of these materials for dissertations, for books, for the next generation of.
The Schomburg, excuse me, the Schomburg in particular, a lot of us as individual artists are contributing our papers, our magazines, our ephemera, so that the scholars will have a place to go to find out information about what really went on.
Right. Right.
You know what I'd like to see? That the Schomburg mission expanded to a lot of universities. So, and my understanding is that there's a lot of universities do, in fact, have archives. But Emory is another one.
Oh, in Atlanta, yeah.
But institutions need to really look at that in terms of collecting.
Yeah, because, you know, the history of African American art can be taught, needs to be widened out, just in terms of the ways in which the Black arts movement actually influenced a whole generation of contemporary artists who were using the material culture of Blackness, all the Black arts movements, such as Afro, such as Picks, you know, the material, Stanford Biggers, right? I'm thinking of all of these younger artists who actually used the iconography that you guys kind of put out there and pioneered in new contemporary forms, right? And so for me, I see what you guys did as living in contemporary example or examples of contemporary art, but I don't see the sort of credit. Not that there needs to be, but I don't see the sort of wink back to what you guys were doing just in terms of individual.
There's a correlation in hip hop. Some more progressive hip hop integrates some of the traditional R&B so into the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a correlation there as well as in the visual arts.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is that the initiatives now, such as Soul of the Nation, such as what we're doing here, and my hope is that this is opening new portals for not so much acceptance, but to begin to collect.
Right.
Now, we have several distinguished promoters here. Lolita is here, and I know yesterday we had the Mackey twins who have galleries. So one of the important things is, look, we all need to pay our rent and buy our art materials. You know, a lot of people think we exist on air. So all of these things are fueling progress. I see a progressive trending going, and that's encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, just the soul of a nation, just to sort of flesh that out, right? And so there are other stories, right? There are other stories, not around that exhibition, but that can actually be inside of that exhibition, right? Just in terms of,
Yeah, but before Soul of the Nation, what was the exhibition that premiered before then at the Brooklyn Museum?
Witness.
Witness. It was Witness, Soul of the Nation, then it was We Wanted a Revolution, Black Radical Women Artists, 1965 to 1980.
So that was kind of a seed. And since that point, the way you see Africa Coburn, and there was a group out in the West Coast, headed by Samela Lewis and others, who also formed the cooperatives. And that was unique in a sense because, as I mentioned yesterday, art is a lonely journey, just by the nature of it. You're creating. So when art is...
you guys come together, it seemed like so much love, You know, I mean, first it's like afros are fabulous, you know, and then it's like, there's also so much love, like, just between you guys, you know, when you see each other, and it seemed like genuine, and that's what catches me every time I see all kind of photographs with you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna,
I was working to wait till.
Yeah.
You need to start packing up with everyone.
No, I understand.
I'm delighted.
you guys are great. If you don't- And I should say, everyone will be back later. So, the,